Kate Milifalcio, welcome to Irish Granny Helen. And, welcome to subscribers old and new. Everybody check your thumbs up and the bell and all that stuff. You might want to consider becoming a member. I do readings, and also I have a SUBSTACK, Ask Your Irish Granny. Lots of stuff over there to look at and to listen to and to read. And if I have a question, give me your questions and I'll solve your problems. Okay, so this is the week, roughly the week of Halloween. And in honor of that, I wanted to do some videos about people that for whatever reason I associate with this time of year. One of my absolute favorite character actors in the whole world was Vincent Price. I actually knew very little about him. I knew all the scary movies, and I knew he'd done voiceover work because I'd heard his voice and I recognized it. I don't know where I heard it, but I did. And I also realized that he made some early movies when he first got into Hollywood. He played character roles, secondary parts. He was not necessarily the star, but they were not camp. They weren't horror. They weren't, sometimes they were like romantic or film noir. And I just really always really liked him. And then, of course, he went through his Edgar Allan Poe period, which is perfect for this time of year. So I decided to do a little research and tell you all about Vincent Price. And then Deborah Lupien and I are going to see what we can find out, voice of the Akashic Records and all. So let's talk about Vincent Price. He was born May 27th, 1911. That sounds so long ago. In St. Louis, Missouri, St. Louis. He was the youngest of 4 children. His father ran the National Candy Corporation. I think it would be like having Willy Wonka be your father. His grandfather, I had no idea. This is so interesting to me. You remember patent medicines and patent cooking stuff. His grandfather invented Dr. Price's baking powder. It was the first ever invented cream of tartar baking powder. And he made a fortune, and the family was very well off. Interesting. Price was a descendant of the first colonists in Massachusetts, the very first colonist born in Massachusetts. Her name was Peregrine White. I love that. Peregrine White. She was born on the Mayflower in Provincetown Harbor. He graduated from Yale. He had a degree in English and a minor in art history. He was actually very drawn to art. Oh, pardon the pun. He taught for a year, and then he began work on his master's degree in fine arts. But one thing led to another. I suppose they had requirements for dabbling in every area of art. I know my daughter got a degree in fine arts in dance performance, but they had to learn how to do lighting. They had to learn how to do sets. They learned how to make costumes. Really interesting. He, in 1935, ended up performing on the stage in Chicago. I don't know. I don't think it could possibly be the musical. I don't think it was invented in 1935. I don't know if it's the same story, but he discovered that he liked and was very good at stage acting. And there's kind of a common thread in early Hollywood where well-known actors actually considered themselves legitimate actors because they were on the stage. It wasn't legitimate to be on film. Just as 30 years later, it wasn't legitimate for a film star to be on television. And now everybody has a podcast. In 1935, he appeared in Chicago. He returned to New York City and was on Broadway. He played Prince Albert in the play Victoria Regina with Helen Hayes, and he kind of became synonymous with that role. He played in a number of successful stage roles, and I didn't really linger on all of the details, the dates, and the names of every single role he ever did and every single movie he did. I sort of cherry picked the ones that I fancy to talk about, really. He began doing character parts in films because, it's hard to find work as an actor. The first horror film that he ever made was 1939. He made The Tower of London with Boris Karloff. Great way to start out. In 1940, he made The Invisible Man. The Invisible Man Returns. He also, in the same time, did a voiceover in Abbott and Costello. So The Invisible Man Returns was made in 1940. Abbott and Costello did Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, and he came back in that movie with his voice as the Invisible Man, but you didn't have to see him because invisible. Throughout the 40s, he played a number of film noir roles, not just scary movies, more like those hard-boiled detective movies with the atmosphere. In 1950, he made the movie The Baron of Arizona, and he played a con man. In 1950, he also did a comedic role, which was kind of new for him, called The Champagne for Caesar. Between 47 and 51, he also played the voice of Simon Templar in The Saint on the radio program, and his voice became associated with that role. In 1953, he made the epic movie, excuse me, House of Wax. That movie scared the liver out of me when I was a child. I saw it on television on a Saturday afternoon. There was always a show, excuse me, called Chiller. And it was a scary show. Some old black and white movie that they dug out for free, probably. And I will never forget watching Vincent Price in the House of Wax. Carolyn Jones played his obsession, this beautiful young woman. I believe she was engaged to his nephew in the movie, if I remember. And he was this crazed owner of a wax museum. And unbeknownst to the public, it was famous for its lifelike statues, wax figures. And the reason they were so lifelike is because they were dead people. He would kill people, kidnap their body, and dip it in wax. That was a great movie. And he wanted Carolyn Jones' character to be his Joan of Arc. I will never forget how scary that was. In 1958, he made The Fly. Help me. Another great classic scary movie. In 1959, he made The Return of the Fly. And he also made a couple of William Castle movies. He was this sort of nonconformist, not associated with the studios, independent guy who made all kinds of odd movies. They made The House on Haunted Hill, and they made The Tingler. And I'm wondering, The House on Haunted Hill, I have fond memories of Vincent Price. As I've mentioned, I'm the oldest of a lot of children, and my parents didn't go out much when I was little. They hardly went out because we were stepping stones, and who wants to babysit a 6-year-old, 4-year-old, 3-year-old, 2-year-old? Nobody sane wants that job. You couldn't pay a person enough to babysit. And we had a neighbor who was from Ireland, and he was a local cop. And he had 2 teenage daughters, and my parents trusted them, and they liked us. And so once in a while, my parents would go out. So this one night, it was always a big deal. So this one night, my parents were going to go out, and we had bedtimes, and I had convinced my mother that I should be allowed to stay up and watch the house, not the House of Wax, the House on Haunted Hill. I was 6, so my brother was 4. And when the babysitter came, my mother said I could watch the movie. And then after my parents left, I convinced the babysitter that she meant to say that my brother could watch it too. So the two of us watched it. He had hissy fits watching it. I was just petrified in my seat, but I watched the whole thing. And when we went to bed, he had screaming nightmares all night. I got into kind of a lot of trouble for that. Let's see here. He also, in 1956, other kinds of movies. He was in The 10 Commandments, and he made TV science fiction theater, Playhouse 90, the General Electric Theater Hour. He was versatile, radio, television, stage, and film. He, in the 60s, made a company with Roger Corman called the American International Pictures Company to produce. They made The House of Usher, and they made a whole lot of Edgar Allan Poe stories into full-length movies, like The Fall of the House of Usher, the Telltale Heart, the Murders in the Rue Morgue. I can't remember the rest, but he made a whole lot of them. All very moody, dark, scary. In 1964, he made The Last Man on Earth, and this was the storyline of a book which should ring a bell, I Am Legend, and I guess they've remade it. In 1967, he made The House of 1,000 Dolls, which has been classified the sleaziest movie ever made. I never saw it. And he did make a few more comedies. He liked doing comedies. He began appearing on Hollywood Squares, that dumb game show. You know, Paul Lynde was the star by far. He appeared on it throughout the 70s, and he actually was one of the stars that appeared on the very final episode in 1980. He made many TV guest starring roles. I gave up trying to copy them all down. You wouldn't remember them anyway, but he was in a million TV shows. He played Egghead. He appeared regularly as Egghead on Batman on television. He also was the unseen narrator in a lot of shows, and he was the voice of the narration at the Old West. What would you call it? It's not like an amusement park, but it was an Old West town of Tombstone, and he was the narrating tour guide, I guess you'd call it. He did a lot of work in England. In the 70s, he did The Price of Fear on BBC. He narrated for it. He also played roles. I guess it was some sort of an episodic show. He did a cameo on a Canadian children's show. He really admired Edgar Allan Poe. He visited Poe's museum in Richmond, Virginia. He and Basil Rathbone made a recording of Poe's short stories and poems. Basil Rathbone made a whole series of black and white films in the, I think, late 30s, early 40s. He played Sherlock Holmes. He was the best Sherlock Holmes. And also, I think he also did a whole lot of black and white movies in the earlier 30s, but he's famous for being Sherlock Holmes. In 1975, Vincent Price and his wife, she was an actress, they appeared together on the London stage, and they appeared together on the BBC radio. They would do theater productions. In the mid-70s, horror shows became less popular. He did more narration and voiceovers. In 1975, he did a monologue. This is great. Talk about open-minded and versatile and willing to try anything. He did a monologue on Alice Cooper's song Black Widow on his album Welcome to My Nightmare. And apparently it was a TV special, and Vincent Price was involved in that too. In the 70s, he did a radio program called Tales of the Unexplained. He appeared on a whole lot of TV sitcoms. He was on Sesame Street. He did Monster Mash, the song, his own version of it for EMI Records. In 1977, he did a play. He appeared as Oscar Wilde on stage. It was so popular that it actually toured the entire globe. He considered it his best performance. He and his family both considered it his best performance. In 1979, he and his wife did a CBS show called Time Express. And in 79, he did a show called America Screams, which was a historical show about roller coasters, but he also traveled around the country and went on site and rode the roller coaster and gave you the history of it. In 1979 and 1980, he did the Sears Radio Theater Mystery Night on the radio. In 82, Tim Burton had him in a movie called Vincent. It wasn't about him, but he did the narration. In 82, he did the narration on the Thriller video with Michael Jackson. Other roles he had. In 86, he did the great Mouse Detective cartoon. He was Professor Ratigan. In 81 to 89, he was the host of a PBS series called Mystery! In 85, he appeared in a remake of Scooby-Doo videos. In 87, he did a 37-minute documentary on roller coasters, and this is as well as the previous historical one. He loved roller coasters. In 85 to 89, he did horror-themed ads for Tilex Cleaner. In 84, he was in several Shelley Duvall fairy tale theater episodes. And if you've never seen those, I didn't have TV when they did them, but they were all on VHS tape. It was a real golden moment in children's television, I believe. She was remarkable, and they were so well done. They were fairy tales acted out by famous people. Really good. In 87, he made The Whales of August with Lillian Gish, of all people. She must have been 150 years old, and Betty Davis and Ann Sothern. Ann Sothern. What did I see Ann Sothern in? My Little Margie, I think, maybe, in the 50s. And for that role in The Whales of August, he won the Independent Spirit Award for the Best Supporting Male. And he would have been 76. In 89, he got the St. Louis Walk of Fame recognition. In 1990, he performed in Edward Scissorhands. He was the inventor. And here's a little bit of trivia for you. Guess who created the Scissorhands on Edward Scissorhands? Dave Johnson's father. Dave Johnson, the channeler, the man in the moon, who lives in Australia, American. Yeah. His father created the Scissorhands for Edward Scissorhands. Small world. In 1990, he narrated Phantom Manor at Disneyland Paris, so it's like a haunted house ride. But one of the things that I'm not sure most people know about him, I didn't know, and I'm a big fan. He was a well-informed, very tasteful, judicious art collector. He eventually was placed on the board of Indian Arts and Crafts. He advocated for indigenous art. He advocated for, what would you call it? There's primitive art. And he advocated, of course, for regular art. He donated and this is really remarkable, 90 pieces of art to begin with to the Vincent Price Art Museum at East LA College in Monterey Park. And if you know Los Angeles, East LA is a poorer part of Los Angeles. It's majority immigrant, majority Hispanic, and they get very ignored and neglected. They're not out of Malibu at the J. Paul Getty Museum. And Vincent Price wanted everybody to experience art, and he thought it was unfair that some people were excluded by virtue of, assumed class or whatever. So he donated all this art and, famous impressionists and modern art and all kinds of art to the East LA College in Monterey Park. And they created a program where it became an offering to the students, and I think to the public, teaching art collection. In other words, it was not just hung on a wall. They actually used it to educate. And it was the first ever program like that at a community college, and it became very popular and it spread. He eventually donated, he and his wife, 2,000 pieces of art. The museum now has 9,000, and what he donated was worth $5 million. Between 62 and 71, and this is interesting, he was the art consultant for Sears Roebuck and Company. The company that had the stores, always the anchor stores at the mall, but they had the big catalogs. And the Sears catalog was just the best to pore over when you were a little kid. They created the Vincent Price collection of fine art. It was home decorating. This was novel. All kinds of famous people do this now, but this was really novel for the time. So these pieces of art that he selected, and I don't know, I wish I had thought to investigate this. I don't know if it included things that he actually created himself or if it was just famous recreations. But nevertheless, this collection was available for purchase by the general public, sold by Sears, and he just believed that art should be available to everybody. Jackie Kennedy, when she was the first lady, bought his portraits of Native Americans. So these were reproductions, because the paintings were by Charles Bird King, the famous paintings of all the different representatives of tribal dress of Native Americans. She bought them for the White House, but Sears said, no, we'll donate them. So that because of Vincent Price, she put those in the White House. He was a gourmet cook. He authored several cookbooks, who knew, with his second wife, and they were reprinted in 2015. So they're apparently still very popular. In 71, he did a British cooking show, Cooking Price-Wise, and he did all kinds of, practical types of things in his show. And Johnny Carson had him on one night as a guest, and he demonstrated how to poach fish in a dishwasher. He recorded cooking tutorials in a big series. He also recorded a course in wine, teaching people about wine. In 1982, he was the host of a show called A Taste of China for Thames TV in England. He was also a guest of Wolfgang Puck's in his show. Let me talk about his private life. He was married 3 times. In 1938, he married Edith Barrett. They had one son, Vincent, and their son became a well-known poet. Just incredible. In 1949, they got divorced. In 1949, he married Mary Grant. They had a daughter, Victoria. Victoria became a well-known inspirational speaker. More about her in a minute. In 1974, he divorced Mary. I think one of these wives died. I forget which one. In 1974, he married Carol, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, Brown, from Australia. She was his 1973 victim in the show The Theater of Blood. And they stayed married until she died in 1991. Now, this was problematic. I was really sad when I read this. And I think before I even say it out loud, I just want to remind myself and everybody else that none of us is perfect. We all have our flaws, and he did evolve. So when I tell you this and you're utterly shocked, you will discover that he completely changed in very positive ways. We all make mistakes, some more egregious than others. But he was a big fan of the Weimar Republic. But no, let me rephrase that. He was a big fan of Germany, but he didn't like the liberal atmosphere of the Weimar Republic. He thought it was too wild, too out there. You could drive down the main road in Berlin. I read about this from somebody who at the time had a diary. And you would drive for miles, big area. And on certain blocks, that you could find a sex worker who was elderly. And then a few blocks later, a sex worker who was into certain things. And in each corner, there was a different category. And they knew where to stand, and the public knew where to find them for whatever proclivity. It was very open, morally relaxed compared to Prussian culture, and he didn't like that. So he liked the old-fashioned Prussian uptightness. So he actually admired Hitler for bringing back what he considered German pride. But he harbored that very faulty impression for a short period of time. But in the same time, he became really good friends with Dorothy Parker and Lillian Hellman. Now, Lillian Hellman, I do believe she was Jewish, and she wrote the book Pentimento and the book Julia. And those stories are about what German culture was like during the Hitler years, and then what happened really under the surface. And as we all know, it wasn't good, to say the least. And his friendship with them completely changed his mind. He got educated, and he got the reality of it. So we will forgive him because he did evolve. He became a liberal. He was gray-listed under the McCarthyism. Now, I looked up gray-listed to try to find what the difference was between that and blacklisted, and I really couldn't find. When I did gray listing, I was referred to blacklisting. So we'll talk about blacklisting. Was literally lists of people who were considered too communist or too subversive or whatever the issue was, and they were not chosen for jobs, not given roles in movies, not hired for certain companies. And this was Joseph McCarthy, Senator Joseph McCarthy's hobby, was blacklisting people. Other little tidbit, Erica Jong, who wrote Fear of Flying, you may all remember that. He had a famous phrase from Fear of Flying that I can't say right here. Her father-in-law was Howard Fast. And he was a writer, a journalist, I think, and a scriptwriter, I think. I probably should look these things up before I talk about him, but it just occurred to me. He was blacklisted, and he was jailed. He was sent to prison because he refused to name names. And I believe his son married Erica Jong, if I have that right. Never mind what Erica's relationship was to Howard Fast, who was brave enough to be imprisoned for his beliefs. He would not turn people in. His granddaughter is Molly Jong Fast, who does a lot of political commentary, has a podcast. Just interesting little tidbit. So he became gray listed for being a premature anti-Nazi, is how they described his crime. And I wrote in parentheses, what? Anyway. Vincent Price's daughter said when FDR died, Price collapsed and sobbed for hours. July 30th of 1950, the NBC radio show, The Saint, that he did on a regular basis every week, at the end of the episode, he departed from the script and he denounced racial and religious prejudice. I told you we'd come back to his daughter, Victoria. His daughter, Victoria, was lesbian. And she came out to him and was extremely concerned about what the reaction would be. As soon as she came out to him, he told her that he had had relationships with men. And then he went and joined PFLAG, Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays. He was publicly a harsh critic of Anita Bryant. Anita Bryant. I should probably do her for Pride Month. What a wacko. He was one of the first to make a public service announcement to help inform and calm the public about HIV/AIDS. So his daughter actually came out to him in 2015, and he admitted to her then that he'd had intimate relationships with men. And I don't know if that was even known. Wasn't on my radar, you know. He developed COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and Parkinson's, which shortened his involvement with the movie Edgar Scissorhands. And he retired from PBS Mystery! Exclamation point. And the reason why I thought of doing him, especially right now, is he died October 25th, 1993, of lung cancer. His ashes were scattered at Nicholas Canyon Beach at Point Dume in Malibu. Beautiful place. He received many honors, much homage. And probably one of the best was Bill Hader, the comedian from Saturday Night Live. He did a fabulous Vincent Price imitation. In 1999, his daughter Victoria wrote a biography of him. John Waters was a huge Vincent Price fan. I think you can just tell by looking at him. And he did a retrospective for Turner Classic Movies. I would love to catch that. So that's the story of Vincent Price. And if you get the opportunity, if you're not familiar with him, I would recommend you see House of Wax, House on Haunted Hill, and The Fly, and then go back and look at some of his earlier stuff. But he was considered always a gentleman, always refined, consummate professional. People really liked him. Nice man. So that's it for Halloween week. So happy Halloween in honor of Vincent Price. Be sure to catch my recording with Deborah, which my calendar is all disarrayed right now. I can't tell you what day it'll be up. It'll be up right before Halloween, so keep your eye open for it in the week of Halloween. And thank you very much for watching Slungafoil. Slunge.